Hello everyone and welcome to my November wrap-up. This is the first wrap-up I'm recording in English, so let's see what happens from here. But here are the books I read this month. There is one that is turned the other way around because I didn't read this actual book. It's just here to illustrate that I read one more, but I do not have a copy of that one. So in November, as you can see, I read 7 books. And now let's talk a little bit about each one of them. However, let's start with the usual stats. For the 7 books I read in November, here are the total number of pages. I read 2013 pages. Wow. Not bad. The first book I had already started in October, hence why those pages, and the second book was actually a DNF, so those were the pages that I read before DNFing the book. For genre-wise, I read 4 thrillers, 1 true crime, 1 general fiction, and 1 graphic novel. Star ratings. One of these books I gave 1 star, one of them was 3 stars, 2 of them were 4 stars, 2 of them were 5 stars, and 1 of them was a DNF that I did not finish. As for projects that I participated in this month, the only one that I was part of was my little project that by now the video is already live, of reading the 10 nominees for the Goodreads Awards. So 4 of these were part of that project, and everything else was just not part of anything, was just reading in general. Now that we covered all the stats, let's talk a little bit more about each book. Some of them, because they were part of the Goodreads Award, I already spoke a little bit more in depth of them in the Goodreads video. I'm not going to go into too much detail now because you can just jump on that video and hear more descriptions and more of my thoughts about them. So let's start. The first book that I finished this month was Before She Knew Him. This is a thriller that follows the story of 2 couples. One of them just moved into a new house, and when they go to the house of the couple that lives across the street from them, the lady of the first couple that has bipolarism, I think that's the name of the disease, discovers in the study of the other couple a statue, ornament thing, like decoration thing, that was given as missing in a murder case investigation that happened a few years prior. So there was this murder case investigation that happened, a murder in a town next to the one where they're moving, and that murder happened in the same neighborhood where they were previously living, and that's why the lady was so connected to that case. So she knew about that murder, and the police said that this statue was missing. They couldn't find it, but they knew it was part of the crime scene. So they moved to this new neighborhood, and when they go to this new neighbor's house across the road, she sees that statue in their office at home. Obviously, she starts getting really suspicious about this guy, the husband of that couple, and she thinks he might be the murderer. However, because she has bipolarism, no one really takes her serious, neither the police, because she has history of having some mental breakdowns and all that. So everyone thinks, what are the odds exactly of you living in a neighborhood where the victim lives, and then you move to a different neighborhood, and that happens to be the neighborhood where the murderer lives. So no one really takes her seriously. This story is told by her point of view. She's the narrator, and at some point we actually start doubting ourselves and doubting her as well, because we don't know if we can trust what she's telling us, if those things actually happen, or if she's in fact just having a huge mental breakdown like all the other characters seem to believe so. So it's hard to know if we can trust her or not. It's a good read, but it didn't swipe me out of my feet or anything. I've read better. It doesn't make you want to keep reading and reading. It's just very average. I gave it 3 stars. Next up we have my DNF of the month. This is I'll Be Gone in the Dark by Michelle McNamara. This book was a very big surprise for me. I was not expecting to DNF it. This, if I had to guess, I would say I was expecting to give it a 5 stars. So as you can see, this was a very big disappointment for me. This is a true crime story about the Golden State Killer, a murderer that lived in California. He was killing people in the 70s and the 80s. He started by being a rapist, and then he progressed into being an actual murderer and killing his victims. There was a very big investigation going on, and the police could not find him. They didn't know who he was, and he kept making victim after victim, and the police had no clue who he was or how to stop him. Michelle was a journalist back then, and she was investigating about this killer herself as well. During the writing of this book, I did not reach that point in the book, but I was told by other people. She died, she had some sort of disease, I don't know what, but she died while she was making her investigation and writing this book, and so her husband finished writing the book, and then it got published after she was already dead. Meanwhile, last year or 2 years ago, the Golden State Killer was finally found and caught and is in jail. But Michelle didn't live to see that happen. So as I was saying, this is a true crime that follows that investigation. I did not like this book. First of all, there was lots of jumps in the timeline. It was not like Michelle was telling you the story of what happened first and what happened next. It was not like you could piece together how the investigation was proceeding so that you could have a clue of how they were getting their hints and how they were getting closer or not to find the guilty person. It was just all over the place. It was very misleading. She would tell you some stories about the victims before the murder happened, and then he would jump on to something else and she would describe something else not related, and then she would go back to that victim and talk about their families and what happened and how they dealt with the fact that they were gone by the Golden State Killer. And I just thought it was very messy. There's lots of people on Goodreads who leave the same kind of comments saying they thought as well it was very messy, the timeline. And I don't know, it was just all over the place, and in some cases it was very dense. In investigation, it was just very formal. I don't really know how to explain. Basically, I was just not enjoying the reading. I was curious to learn more about the details and more about what happened with this really famous killer. But the writing was not for me. I didn't enjoy it. It was very, very boring. I still managed to read 200 pages of this, more than half. This is where I DNF'd it. So as you can see, I read more than half. But after a while, I was just like, I'm so bored of this. Let's read something else, because otherwise we're gonna stay here forever. That's what I thought, but then it didn't go that well, because the next book I read ended up being a 1-star, and that was My Sister, the Serial Killer. I read this for my Goodreads Award Challenge. I read this one before the finalists were announced, because I got this from the library, and it was so small that I thought, might as well read it. If it's part of the finalists, I'm done with it. If it's not, well, it's just a really short book. So I did read it, and it did end up being part of the finalists. However, I don't know how that's possible, because this book is just so bad. This book basically tells the story of two sisters. One of them is a serial killer. She kills her boyfriends just because she's bored of them, I guess. Nothing really is explained why. She always claims that it's in self-defense, but there's never marks on her of why was she defending and what did the boyfriends did to her. So she kills them, and when this book starts, she's on the second kill, I believe. And every time she kills one, she calls her sister, and her sister, older sister, always goes and helps her dispose of the bodies. And the reason why she does that is because she's the older sister and she feels like she needs to protect her younger sister. In my opinion, that doesn't make any sense. Just because you're sisters with someone, you're connected to that person by blood and family, doesn't really mean you need to support them in everything they do. If they do something that is stupid, then I'm sorry, but that's stupid and that's your own shit to deal with. I found this book really the only reason why I didn't DNF it was because it was so short that might as well just finish it. But I did not learn anything with this. It's just so silly. The sister always gets away with it, and the one that is the serial killer, she's just so naive and so protected. Everyone protects her and everyone thinks she's innocent about everything. And whenever the older sister makes a comment about her, if it's like a little bit more mean comment, everyone goes like, oh, you shouldn't say those things about your little sister. Poor girl, she doesn't deserve it. You're so bad for her. And in reality, she's actually helping her dispose of bodies. Don't read it. It's not a good book. I do not recommend it. Next up, I read Anya's Ghost. This is a graphic novel that had quite a good plot twist that I was not expecting. The reason why I wanted to read this, I did not know anything about the story, was purely based on the style of art. Everything is purple. As you can see, it's all in purple and black. The pages are the pages that I like seeing in the graphic novels. They're the ones a little bit thicker and they are shiny and soft. Any graphic novel that has this kind of paper, I'm down. This ends up being the story of a girl that one day she's walking through the woods and she falls into a well, and in that well there is a skeleton, like a person's skeleton, really old, just the bones. She stays in there for a few hours, she's freaking out obviously, and then she gets pulled out of the well. The police finds her, she gets out and she goes home. When she goes home, she discovers that there is a ghost in her bedroom. And it was the ghost of the girl that was in that well earlier. And the reason why she's with her is because she accidentally got a little bone from the skeleton in her backpack or something by accident, and that carried the ghost with her. Oh, actually, now that I'm looking at the images, she actually meets the ghost while she's in the well and she keeps her company for a little bit. And then when she gets rescued, then she discovers the next day that the ghost went with her, and later on she finds out it was because of the tiny bone. So she decides to take the tiny bone with her to school, and the ghost and her become friends. And the ghost helps her chatting to the boys she likes and helps her having good grades in the exam she was doing. So rapidly, they become very good friends. And I'm not going to tell you what happens after, but I was not expecting the story to take this approach. It got a bit weird, but at the same point it was very good, and I'm very happy that he actually went into the unexpected way of telling a story. I really enjoyed this. I gave it 4 stars. Next up, I read Turn of the Key by Ruth Ware. This was again for my Goodreads project. This was one of the finalists. I read this together with Philippa, and this is a story of a 25-something-year-old girl that decides to become a nanny in this house. She sees an advert for it in the newspaper, and she applies, and she goes to an interview, and the minute she gets into the house for the interview, everything starts happening. So basically the house is a smart house. Everything is digital in that house. You know how Google Home works and Alexa and all that? It's like the same thing, except in a much bigger scale of things that Google Home and Alexa cannot even do. Obviously, this is fiction. But basically, everything in the house is electronic and smart. Everything from music to lights to locking the doors to making phone calls just like with the house instead of using the actual phone. There's an app that controls everything. It's very, very technological. And I think it's a bit of a criticism to what our houses are becoming with all these new devices that are coming out. Our houses are becoming smart houses, and this exaggerates it in a way that makes us rethink about, do I really want this for my house? And the answer is yes. If you're wondering, I do have kind of a smart house myself, and the answer is yes. We do want this in our houses. It's amazing. But back to the story. She gets the job, and the first day she's there, the couple goes away to some work meeting or something. So she's responsible for staying at home with a baby, a 5-year-old and an 8-year-old. And then there is a 4th kid that is like 16. She's in a boarding school, so she's not there for most of the book. Eventually she comes back to the house a little bit ahead, but for most part she's not there. Oh, one really important thing about this book that I forgot to tell you, because it's like we also forget how this happened. This whole book is written in letters by the nanny while she's in prison. So when the book starts, she's already in prison, and she's writing these letters to this lawyer, really famous lawyer, and she's asking him to help her, to take her case and defend her. We don't know what happened, but it's what it says here in the back. I know you don't know me, but you have to help me. I didn't kill anyone. So we know one of the kids is dead. We don't know which one, and we don't know what happened. We don't know if she's guilty or not. All we know is that she's in prison. She's accused of being the murderer of that kid, and she's writing letters to this lawyer asking him to help her get out of prison because she says she's not guilty. So in the letters, in the beginning, she's freaking out a bit. She's all over the place. She's very scared. She doesn't want to be in jail. And then slowly she starts writing the letters with much more and more detail of what happened. And it's from those letters that we actually learn what happened in that house, what happened with the kids, how did one thing go to the other. And while we're reading the letters, they are so well written that you actually forget you're reading an actual letter, and you think you're simply reading a description of the actual scene of what happened, the conversations that happened between the different characters, and simply what happened. And then as the last chapter, it goes back to, and that's what happened, and that's why you need to help me. And you're like, oh right, it was a letter. So every single chapter is a letter. There's nothing else here that is not letters, and it's amazing. For me, this won the Goodreads award. The winners are not out yet, but I really hope this is the one, because I adored this book. It's one of my favorite books of all time. I'm so happy I got to read it. Initially, I was even reading it on a library copy, and then I found this in a secondhand bookshop. It's an ARC, and it's amazing, and I'm so happy. This book is so good. If you do enjoy thrillers, please read this one. It's so good. It's one of the best thrillers I've ever read, and it's one of my favorite books, and quite probably the best book of the year. I'm not sure, but this is so good. Seriously, read this. Please read this. Next up is the book that I do not own a copy of. It is Lock Every Door by Rayleigh Sager. I'll put a picture here of the cover. I listened to the audiobook of this one, and it was actually quite funny because this also tells us a story about a house. So I had just finished reading The Turn of the Key about this smart house, and then I go into this one and it's also about a house. In this case, it's not a smart house, but a very famous, hypothetical, doesn't exist, building in New York right in front of Central Park. Again, this building does not exist because otherwise it would be really cool, but it doesn't exist. But basically, it's this really old, really famous building in New York that is known for all the rich people, rich and famous people that live in there. And there's lots of myths and stories going around, but no one knows if those things are true or not. There's some things about some people that die in that building, some stories about ghosts and things that people come with, things that people have invented along the years. The whole building is surrounded by all these stories and myths. One day, this girl, she just lost her job, and she discovered her boyfriend was cheating on her exactly on the same day. So she lost her job and her boyfriend on the same day. She's living with a friend when she sees again in a newspaper an advert to be a house sitter. She goes to the interview and initially she thinks it must be wrong, it cannot be this. But the house sitting job was to house sit one of the apartments in that building. She goes in with the lady that is showing her the apartment, and the apartment is amazing, is huge, is super luxury, the whole building is, and she's getting paid $4,000 a month for 3 months just to live in that building. Obviously, being in the situation that she is at the moment with no job, no money, and no house, she thinks that's an amazing opportunity and she needs to take it. With that job comes a bunch of rules that she needs to follow, and I'm not going to tell you which rules they are, but she accepts them and she moves into the apartment. When she moves into that apartment, she starts hitting the fan from everywhere, things start happening. I'm not going to tell you what, obviously, because it's part of the fun discovering what's happening and where is it coming from. She starts interacting with the neighbors and knowing other people that live there, other apartment sitters, and some of the very rich, very famous people as well. So this book is involved in mystery the whole time. When it starts, we know the girl is in the hospital. We don't know what happened, but the whole book happens in only 5 days, because it starts with her in the hospital and then it goes back to 5 days before, tells a bunch of a story, then back to her in the hospital, and then 4 days before, back to her in the hospital, 3 days before, and so on and so on. So the whole book is only 5 days long, and we know that somehow she was only in that apartment, in that famous building for 5 days, and in 5 days was enough for everything to go from amazing to something really bad that happened and caused her to be in the hospital. We don't know what it is, but it's a really good book. I gave it 5 stars. I also recommend it very much. It's amazing. If this book wins the Goodreads awards, I won't be upset. It's a very good book, and yeah. And finally, the last book I read this month was An Anonymous Girl, The Greer Hendricks and Sarah Peckerman. This was again another thriller for my Goodreads nominees thing. This book follows the story of a girl that joins an investigation study of a psychiatrist. This study is about ethics and morality and is a paid study, meaning she would be getting money to participate in these studies. It starts by being some sessions in the computer where she's asked some questions. What would you do in this situation? Have you ever had a situation like this? And she just has to type her answers and she's getting paid for it. So she thinks it's amazing, some extra money, and all goes well. Then she's invited to participate in the second part of the study, where she actually meets the psychiatrist that is leading this study. And she starts having tasks that involve her to go places and talk to people, and again report to the psychiatrist. It's all part of this study. The chapters are alternating between the girl, Jessica, and the psychiatrist. Obviously, I don't want to reveal too much of what's happening, but the psychiatrist, she's a complete psycho. She's crazy about everything, the amount of details that everything needs to have and the amount of organization that everything needs to have. So much so that her chapters, she's telling us, the reader, what happened, and she tells us like if it was a report. Let me give you an example, because otherwise you're not going to understand what I mean. So let's say on Jessica's chapters, she talks like a normal person, as in, I saw John, I walked across the street to say hi, we chatted for a few minutes, he told me his wife had gone out for coffee, I said that, blah, blah, blah. A normal description of events, right? The chapters that are of the psychiatrist, instead of being told in a normal way, as a normal person would tell the way something happened, say something like this. The newspaper is gathered from the coffee table and tucked in the recycling bin. The dishwasher is emptied. Then the study is surveyed. The faintest scent of oranges perfumes the room. The bowl containing them is picked up and brought to the kitchen. The oranges are dropped into the trash can. Citrus fruits have never held much appeal. After the lights are extinguished on the main level and the stairs climbed, a lilac-colored silk nightgown and matching robe are selected. Night serum is dotted around the eyes with a gentle touch of my ring finger. Then a rich moisturizing cream is applied. So instead of her being like, I emptied the dishwasher and got the newspaper and put it in the recycling bin, and then I went upstairs, got my pajama and put some face cream on, she says it like this. So it's very professional in a way. It's like she's writing reports about everything. And just by the way her chapters are written, just the fact that they're written like this, it makes us think she must be crazy. She must be obsessed about details and everything. And that's the biggest giveaway of her personality. I don't think this is a spoiler of the story, because her chapters start straight away from the beginning and you can see straight away that they are written written in this weird manner. I gave this book 4 stars. Like I said, it alternates chapters between Jessica, who's participating in the study, and the psychiatrist who's leading the study, and we don't know exactly what the psychiatrist is trying to accomplish with this. I mean, we do know because we have a little bit of insight from her chapters. We know the backstory, but then Jessica is on her free time trying to find out the reasons as well, so we also have that, and there's a few things that Jessica finds out before we actually do from the psychiatrist chapters. This is getting really confused. It's not a book with lots of plot twists for saying, but it's one of those where information is being revealed little by little. Every now and then a little bit of information is given, and then the puzzle pieces start to add up together and things start making sense in the story, so that at the end it's one of those when you finally get the last piece, you have one of those moments like, it all makes sense. It's so well written, the way the pieces get together, and the story just makes sense from the beginning. And the little details that you were presented with in the beginning of the story finally make sense, and it's very, very well written. It's the second book that I read from these two ladies, Greer Hendricks, Sarah Beckerman. The other one I think was a bit more based on plot twists. It's this one here, The Wife Between Us. This one is more in the way, like I was saying, you are given the information little by little. They are both very good. I gave this one a 4 stars, like I said. I recommend it. It's one of those books that takes a little bit of time. It's not very fast-paced. Things are not happening all the time. They are happening slowly, and you get really immersed in the story. So you do connect to the characters and you do feel for them, but everything happens really slowly. However, it's a 4 stars, and I do recommend if you like good thrillers as well. And there you go, guys. These were the 7 books that I read during the month of November. In general, it was a very good reading month for me. 2 5 stars and 2 4 stars. It was amazing. It doesn't happen that often, but yay! It just serves to conclude that I really enjoy reading thrillers, and when I focus my month in reading thrillers, good things happen and good things come from there. Do let me know in the comments if you have read any of these books, or if you are curious to read any of them now that you heard me speaking about them. If you haven't already, please do watch my vlog experience of reading the 10 nominees for Best Thriller of the Year from Goodreads. I'm gonna link it here in the cards and down there in the description below as well. As always, if you have any reading recommendations for me, any books that you think I would enjoy reading, then please leave them down there in the comments so I can add them to my recommendations list. And I'll see you on my next video. Bye!